Her name was Claire, and I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with her. My name's Ryan. I'm 34, and for most of my adult life, I've believed that love was something you build, not something that just happens. You put in the work, you show up, you communicate, and you protect what you care about. I used to think that's what Claire and I had. Until one night, she looked me straight in the eye and told me she was engaged to someone else. Still living in my house, still eating food from my fridge, still wearing the necklace I bought her for our anniversary 2 months earlier. But let me back up a bit, because the truth is, things didn't explode overnight. It was like watching a crack spread across glass in slow motion. I met Claire 8 years ago through a mutual friend. I was just getting my business off the ground, a small IT consulting firm, and she was working as a graphic designer for a local magazine. She was charming, creative, a little impulsive, but that's what drew me in. I liked that she lived with emotion. She made every day feel like it mattered. We moved in together after 2 years, got a dog, and started talking about marriage. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. Then, about a year ago, things started to change. Subtly at first. She'd stay late at work more often. Her phone was always on silent, face down. She said she was too tired to talk or go out. I thought it was burnout. Her job had been pushing tight deadlines, so I gave her space. I cooked dinner, handled the chores, even covered her half of the rent when her freelance projects slowed down. She thanked me, but the words felt rehearsed. The warmth in her eyes that used to be there wasn't. One night, she came home wearing a new perfume I didn't recognize. I teased her about it. She froze for half a second before smiling and saying, "Oh, it was a sample from work." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the way she said it, too casual, too controlled, planted a seed of doubt. Around the same time, she started hiding her laptop screen when I walked by. I caught glimpses of messages once, just a few lines. "Can't wait to see you again." And he doesn't suspect anything. It hit me like a punch to the gut, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. People text friends like that all the time, right? Maybe I was overthinking it. Except she started guarding that laptop like it held state secrets. Then came the night she didn't come home. Said she was working on a last-minute project. Her boss texted me the next morning, asking if she was feeling better because she'd called in sick. That's when denial gave way to cold, heavy dread. I didn't confront her immediately. I wanted to be sure, to have something concrete. So I waited. Watched. A week later, I noticed a recurring charge on our joint credit card, a boutique hotel downtown. Same one. Every Thursday. When I asked her about it, she said, "It's for a client meeting space." The kind of client meeting that apparently required champagne and an overnight stay. Still, I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I played dumb, but something inside me started to detach. I began documenting everything. Receipts, screenshots, even the dates she was working late. I didn't know why yet, but a part of me sensed I'd need it. Then came the breaking point. She walked in one evening, dressed up like she was going out again. I asked if she wanted dinner. She hesitated, then looked me dead in the eyes and said, almost calmly, "Ryan, I'm engaged." I thought I misheard. Engaged? To who? To Mark, she said. "We've been together for months." I felt my pulse slow. I wasn't angry in that moment. I was hollow. She was still standing in our kitchen, under the same roof, surrounded by everything we'd built together. "You're still living here," I said quietly. "You've been seeing someone else while living here?" She crossed her arms. "It's complicated. I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You didn't want to hurt me? You're wearing my sweatshirt right now." She rolled her eyes like I was the one being unreasonable. "You always overreact. I just fell out of love with you. I met someone who understands me better. But until I move out, can we just be adults about it?" That word, adults, hit me hard. Like she was the reasonable one, and I was some irrational child. That's when something in me finally clicked off. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "All right." She blinked. "All right. Yeah," I said softly. "If you're engaged, then you shouldn't be living here. I'll give you a few hours to get what's yours." She looked relieved, almost smug. "Thank you, Ryan. I knew you'd understand." While she showered, I called the police. Explained the situation, joint property, potential trespassing issue, and the fact that she'd admitted to living here under false pretenses. When the officers arrived, she came out of the bathroom in her robe, confused and furious. "You're seriously doing this?" she shouted. I didn't answer. I handed her a duffel bag and said, "Take what's yours. The rest stays." She screamed, called me heartless, manipulative, pathetic. The neighbors probably heard everything. But by the time she was escorted out, I felt nothing, just silence. That night, I changed the locks, froze our joint accounts, and sat in the living room staring at her empty shoes by the door. 8 years. Gone. But oddly, it felt like air returning to my lungs after being underwater for too long. The next morning, just as I was making coffee, I heard banging at the gate. Loud, angry banging. A man's voice yelled, "Open up, coward." I walked outside, still in my robe. There he was, tall, red-faced, wearing a wrinkled suit and holding his phone like he was ready to record. "You think you can just throw her out?" he shouted. "You messed with the wrong person." I studied him for a moment. Mark, the new fiancé, the man she'd apparently been seeing for months. "Good morning," I said calmly. "You must be Mark." He sneered. "You're gonna regret what you did to her. She told me everything. You're controlling, jealous, broke." I cut him off by reaching into my pocket. "You came all this way," I said quietly. "So I should probably give you something." I handed him an envelope. He frowned, tore it open, and as he started reading, the color drained from his face. For a moment, he didn't say a word. His hand trembled. Then he looked up at me, completely silent. And that's where everything really began to unravel. Mark stood there gripping the envelope like it was a live wire. I didn't say anything. I just watched him process what he was reading. His face went from anger to confusion to something like fear. Then, without a word, he folded the papers, tucked them back into the envelope, and walked away. Didn't yell, didn't threaten, just left. I stood there on the porch, coffee still steaming in my hand, trying to understand what kind of life I'd just stepped into. The quiet after chaos always feels strange. It's not peace. It's a kind of hollow echo, where everything you used to know is gone, and you're standing in the ruins trying to remember who you were before. That's what the next few days felt like. The house was too clean, too silent. Her toothbrush still in the holder. Her perfume still faintly in the air. I found myself opening drawers just to confirm that yes, she was really gone. But somehow, even without her there, the drama wasn't over. 3 days later, I started getting texts. Not from her, but from mutual friends, the kind that never check in unless something's wrong. "Hey man, just checking if you're okay. Heard about Claire." Or, "She told us her side, but I figured I'd ask you before I believe anything." That second one stung, because that meant she was talking. I asked one friend, Luke, what exactly she was saying. He hesitated. "Man, she's telling people you flipped out, that you locked her out with no warning and took all her stuff." I laughed bitterly. "Took her stuff?" "She took my sanity." Luke didn't laugh. "She also said you tried to ruin her career. Something about you threatening her clients." That part made me sit up. What? I haven't even spoken to anyone she works with. But it didn't matter. A story spreads faster than the truth ever can. The next morning, one of my longtime clients called and asked if I was handling things okay. When I pressed him, he admitted Claire had reached out to warn him about working with me. She'd said I was emotionally unstable after a breakup and might not be reliable. It was a perfect manipulation. Not aggressive enough to get her in trouble, but just enough to plant doubt. I realized then that she wasn't just gone. She was trying to rewrite the story, make herself the victim, me the villain. And for a while, I didn't fight it. I told myself the people who mattered would know the truth. But then the consequences started stacking up. One of our shared accounts, which I'd frozen, somehow got accessed again. Small withdrawals at first, $300 here, $500 there. Then a $1,200 charge for wedding consultation services. I contacted the bank, and they confirmed the transfer was authorized by someone using my login credentials. When I asked for the access location, they said it came from her parents' house. So now I wasn't just dealing with her. I was dealing with her entire family. I'd always been on okay terms with her parents. Her mom, Sandra, was polite in that way people are when they're secretly judging you. Her dad, Tom, was the type who'd shake your hand too hard to make sure you knew who the man of the house was. During our relationship, they tolerated me because I made good money and treated their daughter well. But when things went south, they switched sides faster than I could blink. The first call came from Sandra. "Ryan," she said sweetly, "I just wanted to clear the air. Claire told us you're going through a difficult time, and we just want you to know there's no hard feelings." I stayed silent for a moment. No hard feelings. I repeated. Your daughter lied, cheated, and tried to drain my accounts. There was a pause. Then that condescending tone came back. Relationships are complicated, dear. Maybe you both made mistakes. I almost laughed. Sure. My mistake was trusting her. Before she hung up, she added, well, I hope you'll be mature about this. Claire deserves to move on. That phrase, be mature, was becoming a pattern. It's what people say when they want you to stay quiet while they do whatever they want. A few days later, I found out Claire had moved in with Mark full-time. They were living in a small apartment downtown, not far from her old workplace. At first, I didn't care. Let them have each other. But then Mark started showing up again. Once, I came home to find him parked across the street, pretending to check his phone. Another time, he followed me to the grocery store and accidentally bumped into me near the checkout line. Still playing the victim. Huh, he said under his breath as we stood in line. I turned to him slowly. You really want to have this conversation here? He smirked. She told me how you tried to ruin her after she left. How you called the police on her like a coward. I stared at him for a long second. You ever stop to wonder why she got kicked out? He looked thrown off for just a moment, then recovered. Because you're insecure. I didn't answer. Just paid for my groceries and walked out. But inside, I was boiling. Because that was the thing. He genuinely believed her version. And why wouldn't he? Claire was smart. She knew how to twist a story, so she always came out looking like the misunderstood one. A week after that, I started getting strange mail. One was a formal letter from her lawyer, or so she claimed, accusing me of withholding personal property. The next was a message from her brother on social media, calling me a manipulative loser who couldn't keep a woman. It was like she'd turned her whole family into her PR team. The lowest point came when my mother called me out of the blue. She sounded hesitant. Ryan, sweetheart, did you really throw her out with the police? I sighed. Mom, you're not seriously believing this, are you? I don't know what to believe, she said softly. Her mother called me. Said you had a breakdown. That's when I realized this wasn't about embarrassment anymore. It was a smear campaign. And while I was trying to hold on to my sanity, Claire and Mark were out playing the perfect couple. I'd see them on social media, smiling at brunch, holding hands at a charity event, posing like they hadn't detonated my life 3 weeks earlier. People were congratulating them on their engagement. Comments like, you two are soulmates, and so happy you found each other, flooded every post. It was surreal. I tried to move on, focus on work, but even there, her shadow followed me. One of my new clients pulled out of a deal last minute after a personal recommendation told them I was untrustworthy. I didn't have to guess who made the call. I remember sitting in my office one night, staring at the wall, thinking, how did I let this happen? How did I let her have this much power over me even after she's gone? That's when something shifted. I stopped thinking like the betrayed ex and started thinking like the strategist I used to be. The guy who built a company from nothing. The guy who planned 6 steps ahead. If Claire wanted to play dirty, I could play smart. The first thing I did was dig into the financial mess she left behind. Turns out, she'd been siphoning small amounts of money from our joint account for months, disguised as business expenses. I started collecting every record, every transfer, every email she'd sent me asking for temporary help. Then I found something interesting. One of the hotel charges from our shared card matched the date and location of a marketing conference she claimed to be attending. But when I checked the hotel's business event calendar online, there was no such conference. What there was, however, was a reservation for Mark and Claire anniversary suite. That told me 2 things. 1, she was sloppy. 2, she didn't expect consequences. Around this time, Mark showed up one more time, not at my house, but at my office. My receptionist looked terrified when she called me from the front desk. There's a man here demanding to see you, she whispered. Says it's urgent. When I walked out, Mark was pacing in the lobby, red in the face again. He spotted me instantly. You think you're clever, huh? He snapped. Sending that envelope? I stayed calm. I'm surprised you're still talking to me after reading what was inside. He flinched. You forged it. Sure, I said evenly. That must be easier than accepting the truth. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. You're not going to get away with this. Get away with what? I asked quietly. He didn't answer, just glared, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out. My assistant, watching from behind the desk, whispered, what was that about? I just shook my head. Personal history. But inside, my heart was pounding. because his reaction confirmed something. That envelope had hit harder than I thought. He wasn't angry because he didn't believe it. He was angry because he did. And as much as I wanted to move on, I knew it wasn't over. Claire was still out there, spinning her story, digging her claws into my reputation. Her parents were calling my mother, her friends were turning against me, and her fiancé, the man she cheated with, was now my uninvited shadow. But if she thought I'd just sit quietly while she played the victim, she was about to learn exactly who she underestimated. Because I hadn't just frozen our accounts. I'd done something else, too. Something she still didn't know about. And that envelope? That was only the first warning shot. It started quietly, the way the worst betrayals always do. A small notification, a single email, and then the entire floor drops out from under you. It was a Wednesday morning, about 3 weeks after Mark's uninvited office visit. I'd finally begun to feel some semblance of stability again. I was working late, keeping my head down, rebuilding my client base after the fallout. For the first time in months, I'd gone an entire day without thinking about Claire. Then I opened my inbox. The subject line read, "Formal notice of civil action, unauthorized use of funds." At first, I thought it was spam, some phishing attempt. But as I scrolled down, my stomach twisted. It was legitimate. It came from an actual law firm, one I recognized. It was Claire's lawyer, the same one who'd sent me that vague letter weeks ago. According to the email, Claire was suing me for embezzlement. Apparently, she was claiming that during our relationship, she had entrusted me with managing joint finances and that I had intentionally withheld or redirected personal funds for my own business without her consent. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. She was accusing me of the exact thing she'd been doing behind my back. Attached to the email were fake statements, doctored screenshots showing transfers that supposedly went from her accounts into mine. I recognized the layout, the formatting. It looked professional. Except one thing, the timestamps didn't match. They were all from dates when she was out of town, supposedly on work trips. Still, it was enough to force my hand. My lawyer, Jonathan, was a calm, seasoned guy who'd handled messy business disputes before. When I showed him the email, he frowned, adjusted his glasses, and said, "This isn't about money. It's about leverage." "Leverage for what?" I asked. "To make you back off," he said simply. "She's escalating. She wants to control the narrative." I ran a hand through my hair. "So what? She trashes my reputation, sues me, and I just take it?" Jonathan sighed. "No, but we have to be smart. If she wants a war, we'll fight it on our terms." That conversation marked the beginning of the next phase. One where I realized Claire wasn't just vengeful. She was strategic. Every move she made now had purpose. And for the first time, I started to wonder if maybe Mark wasn't the mastermind behind this chaos. Maybe he was just another pawn. Over the next few days, my lawyer and I started gathering evidence to counter her claims. We went through every statement, every bank record, every receipt I'd kept from the last year. I still had all the proof, the withdrawals, the hotel bookings, the temporary transfers. It was enough to tear her argument apart. But before we could even respond legally, she hit me where it hurt most, personally. My parents called again, this time furious. "Ryan, what on earth did you do?" my mother demanded. "What are you talking about now?" I said, already exhausted. "She sent us the lawsuit papers," my father snapped. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for us? The neighbors are talking." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Why would you believe her?" "Because she included proof," my mother said, her voice trembling. "Screenshots, transfers. Ryan, they look real." "She faked them," I said flatly. "She's trying to frame me." There was silence. Then my father said something that felt like a knife between my ribs. "Maybe you should just apologize, son. Make peace and move on." Apologize? To the woman who'd betrayed me, robbed me, lied about me, and now was trying to destroy me publicly. That conversation was the first time I truly felt alone. My parents, my friends, my colleagues, everyone had heard her version. To them, I was the bitter ex who couldn't let go. She'd even posted a vague Instagram story that said, "Sometimes you have to protect yourself from people who smile while they sabotage you." It had over 200 likes. I didn't have to guess who it was about. The thing that broke me, though, wasn't the lawsuit or the rumors. It was what came next. A few days later, Jonathan called me sounding uneasy. "Ryan, I need you to come in. We have a problem." When I arrived, he handed me a folder. Inside were photocopies of documents, all signed, all with my name. They were loan agreements, apparently showing that I'd borrowed money from Claire to keep my business afloat and had agreed to repay it with interest. Except I'd never signed any such thing. The signatures were eerily close to mine, close enough that to anyone else, they'd look legitimate. But I noticed something she didn't. The signature was the version of my name I'd used years ago before I changed my business branding. She'd copied it from old contracts, from before we even lived together. She's been planning this, I said quietly. For months. Jonathan nodded grimly. And she's good at it. But she made one mistake. What's that? She underestimated you. He was right. And yet, before I could even take comfort in that thought, another hit landed. This time from someone I never expected. My business partner, Ethan, called me late that night. Ryan, I need to ask you something, he said, his voice hesitant. Did you really take money from the company to cover personal expenses? I froze. What are you talking about? I got an anonymous tip, he said. An email with screenshots, bank transactions, messages between you and Claire. My heart dropped. She sent them to you? I don't know who sent them, he said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. Look, man, I've known you a long time, but if there's any truth to this, there's not, I said firmly. You know me, Ethan. Come on. I want to believe that, he said quietly. But until this clears up, I think it's best if we freeze your access to the business accounts. That was the moment it hit me. She wasn't just trying to hurt me emotionally. She was trying to dismantle my life piece by piece. Friends, family, work. She was methodically poisoning every relationship I had. And the worst part? She was doing it with such precision that it almost looked effortless. I sat in my office long after Ethan hung up, staring at the city lights outside my window. My company, something I'd built from scratch over 8 years, was now slipping through my fingers because one person couldn't stand not being in control. That night, I drove past Claire and Mark's apartment. I don't even know why. Maybe part of me still wanted to see if she looked guilty, if she showed any sign of remorse. But what I saw instead made my stomach turn. They were hosting a dinner party. Lights glowing through the windows, laughter spilling out, champagne glasses clinking. I saw her through the window, smiling, radiant, wearing the necklace I'd bought her on our 5th anniversary. My gift. My mistake. For the first time, I felt something sharper than sadness. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about power. And I realized something else. That envelope I'd given Mark weeks ago, it was only part of the truth. He didn't even know the full extent of what was inside it. And soon, he'd wish he had. The next morning, I got a call from Jonathan again. She's filed a motion to freeze your assets, he said. Claims you're a flight risk. I almost laughed. A flight risk? I haven't even left the city. He sighed. It's a scare tactic. But she's taking this public. If you think the gossip was bad before, he didn't need to finish. I already knew. The story was spreading again, not through friends this time, but through professional circles. Someone had posted about me on a local business forum, calling me a fraud hiding behind a fake company. Anonymous, of course. By the end of that week, I'd lost 2 more clients. It was like watching someone burn your house down one room at a time, and all you could do was stand outside, helpless, while people walked by and said, "You must have done something to deserve it." But what Claire didn't realize was that while she was busy painting me as the villain, I was quietly collecting the evidence that would turn her perfect little narrative upside down. Every fake document, every message she sent pretending to be me, every financial transaction she tried to hide, I was tracking all of it. And when the time came to strike back, it wouldn't be out of anger. It would be with precision, because she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Not when she tried to destroy not just my name, but my life. And she had no idea what I still had. The one piece of information that could tear her new fairy tale apart in front of everyone she'd fooled. But before I could use it, something happened that made me realize just how far she was willing to go. The night that changed everything. The night everything came crashing down started like any other, quiet, lonely, and far too long. I was at the office, half working, half pretending to. My desk lamp was the only light in the room, casting long shadows across stacks of papers I'd already read a dozen times. It had been 2 months since Claire's lawsuit, and though I'd managed to block most of her attempts to drain me financially, she'd already succeeded in doing something much worse. She'd made people doubt me. It was strange how silence could feel heavier than noise. I used to love working late. It made me feel productive, in control. Now it just reminded me of how empty everything had become. The business was running on autopilot, my team uneasy, my partner distant. Even the dog, my golden retriever, Milo, seemed to sense it. He used to greet me at the door, tail wagging like a metronome. Now he'd just lift his head from the couch, like he was checking if I was still hanging in there. That night, I got home around midnight. As I walked up the steps, I noticed something strange. The porch light was on, even though I hadn't turned it on when I left. My first thought was that I'd forgotten, but when I reached for the doorknob, my stomach dropped. The lock, the one I'd changed after Claire left, was scratched. Freshly, my heart started pounding. I opened the door slowly, and the first thing I saw was a trail of muddy footprints leading across the hardwood floor. Milo, I called, my voice low. He didn't bark. I stepped inside, flicked the lights on, and froze. The living room looked like a storm had hit it. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered, the photo frames I'd taken down months ago now smashed on the floor. My laptop was gone. So was the external hard drive I kept my backups on. I ran upstairs. My bedroom, same thing. The closet was half empty. A few of my suits missing, along with the small lockbox I kept in the top drawer of my dresser. That lockbox wasn't about money. It had something far more valuable inside. The original documents from my business incorporation, Claire's old NDA, and, most importantly, the evidence I'd been collecting against her. All gone. I stood there, gripping the doorknob so tight my knuckles turned white. For a second, my brain refused to accept it. Then I heard Milo bark faintly from the backyard. I ran downstairs, heart pounding, and there he was, locked outside on the patio. The back door's glass pane was cracked. Someone had broken in, but they hadn't just taken random things. They knew exactly what to look for. And there was only one person who knew that lockbox existed. Claire. I called the police, filed a report, but I already knew how it would go. They'd ask if I suspected anyone. I'd say yes. They'd note it down, say they'd look into it, and that would be the end of it. No fingerprints, no forced entry they could pin definitively on her. Just another civil matter. When the officers left, I sat on the couch in the wrecked living room, staring at the empty space where my laptop used to be. I should have felt anger, but all I felt was exhaustion. Like she'd finally found the last nerve left in me and cut through it. Over the next few days, things spiraled fast. The lawsuit gained traction, not in court yet, but in whispers. My clients started pulling back one by one. A few said they needed time to review our agreement. A few didn't even respond. And then Ethan, my business partner, called a meeting. When I walked into the office conference room, everyone was already there. Ethan, 2 senior team leads, and our accountant. The air was thick. Ethan cleared his throat. Ryan, we need to talk about the future of the company. I knew what was coming. He continued. This situation with Claire is becoming disruptive. Clients are asking questions. Investors are nervous. So you want me to step down? I said. He looked pained. Just temporarily. Until things settle. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a dry laugh. You think she's going to stop? She won't. She wants to erase me, Ethan. This isn't about money anymore. He didn't meet my eyes. I know. But we have to think about the company. That phrase, think about the company, hit me harder than I expected. I was the company. I'd built it from nothing, spent nights coding through fevers, mortgaged my car to fund payroll once. And now I was being quietly pushed out of my own creation because of her. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Fine, I said. Do what you have to. I left the building that afternoon feeling like I was walking through fog. The city moved around me. Cars, people, sounds, but none of it felt real. I couldn't even feel angry anymore. It was like something inside me had gone still. Over the next few weeks, my life shrank. The company faded into the distance. My friends, at least the ones who hadn't already taken sides, stopped reaching out. My parents called less often, probably too uncomfortable to face the awkwardness. Bills piled up. My savings dwindled faster than I liked to admit. Between legal fees and lost income, I was bleeding money. The worst moment came one morning when I woke up to find an email from my landlord. Apparently, Claire had filed a claim of shared property on the house, arguing that since we'd lived together for over 5 years and contributed jointly to expenses, she was entitled to partial ownership. That was the day I realized I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed what I could fit in my car, clothes, some files, Milo's things, and drove away. I didn't even look back. The house that once felt like a home now looked like a crime scene. I found a small rental on the edge of town, a one-bedroom place that smelled faintly of old paint and dust. It wasn't much, but it was quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't heavy, just empty. For the first few days, I barely slept. I'd lie awake, replaying every conversation, every red flag I'd ignored. The way she used to say, "You don't trust me," whenever I asked a simple question. The times she'd brushed off her phone lighting up in the middle of the night. The small lies that didn't make sense but felt too trivial to question. It's strange how hindsight turns you into a detective in your own life. But then, slowly, something started to change. I didn't realize it at first. It was subtle. I'd wake up earlier, take Milo for longer walks, start cooking again, even if it was just scrambled eggs and toast. The noise in my head began to fade a little. I wasn't happy, not even close, but I was calm. And in that quiet, a thought began to form. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. For months, Claire had been writing the story. She'd cast herself as the victim and me as the villain. But I still had something she didn't, the truth. And as much as she'd tried to erase it, she'd made one mistake. When she broke into my house and took my lockbox, she assumed that was the only place I kept evidence. She didn't know about the second backup, the encrypted drive I'd uploaded to cloud storage months earlier. The one that held everything. Emails, messages, voice notes. Proof that she'd been siphoning money long before she left. Proof that she'd falsified documents using old digital templates from my files. Proof that the envelope I'd handed Mark, the one that made him go silent, wasn't just a bluff. Because inside that envelope had been a single-page summary of her scheme. Not complete, but enough to make him start doubting her. Enough to plant a crack in their perfect little facade. Now, I had the full version. I remember sitting in that tiny rental, laptop open, the blue glow of the screen reflecting off my coffee mug. Milo asleep beside me. For the first time in months, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't exhausted. I was focused. Because while I'd lost almost everything, my home, my company, my reputation, I still had the one thing she couldn't take from me, my ability to think ahead. She'd built her lies on sand, and I was holding the tide. But before I could make my move, something unexpected happened. I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Mr. Carter, this is Detective Morales from the Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a fraud complaint filed under your name." I froze. "Fraud complaint?" "Yes," she said. "It appears someone's been using your personal information to apply for credit cards and loans. The activity spans the last 6 months." 6 months. The exact period before Claire left. I didn't answer for a long moment. Then I said quietly, "Detective, I think I know who did it." And just like that, everything shifted again. The rock bottom wasn't just about losing everything. It was realizing that she wasn't done. Not yet. But neither was I. When Detective Morales called, something inside me clicked back on. The part of me that had been dormant for months, buried under grief and humiliation. I'd spent too long reacting, defending myself, cleaning up her chaos. But this was a turning point. For the first time since she said, "I'm engaged," I wasn't on the defensive. The moment she'd committed a real crime using my identity, the game changed. We met the next morning at the police precinct, a gray, sterile building that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Morales was sharp, mid-40s, with that calm intensity that comes from seeing people lie for a living. She didn't waste time. "We have records of at least 4 credit cards and 1 personal loan application made using your name and social security number," she said, sliding a file across the table. The transactions were small, spread out, but the timing suggests intent. I flipped through the pages, my pulse quickening. The signatures were familiar. Too familiar. Claire had copied my handwriting almost perfectly, but not perfectly enough. She'd made the same telltale mistake twice, the way she looped her R's. "She forged these," I said. "I can prove it." Morales nodded slowly. "We'll need documentation, bank statements, timestamps, any digital records linking her to your accounts." "I have everything," I replied. And I meant it. The encrypted drive I'd uploaded months ago contained every scrap of proof she'd ever given me, screenshots, emails, even the recordings I'd forgotten about. Over the next week, I worked with the detectives team like it was a second job. They built a timeline of her activities, the fake applications, the transfers, even the bogus documents she'd submitted to the bank. The more they found, the clearer it became. Claire hadn't just been malicious. She'd been systematic. And then came the discovery that turned my quiet revenge into a full-scale checkmate. One of the fraudulent loan applications listed her new address, the one she shared with Mark. But here's the thing. She didn't use her own name as a reference. She used his, without his knowledge. Morales smiled when she found it. That's identity theft. 2 victims. That gives us a bigger case. I remember sitting there in that tiny police office, trying not to smile. Not because I was happy she'd gone that far, but because she'd finally tripped over her own arrogance. For the first time, I wasn't the one fighting to prove myself innocent. She was about to fight to prove she wasn't guilty. While the investigation was ongoing, I started putting my own life back together. It wasn't glamorous, no overnight redemption arc, but it was steady. I called Ethan, my business partner, and laid everything out. The forged documents, the police case, the recordings. I didn't try to convince him. I just sent him the evidence and said, "Decide for yourself." 2 days later, he showed up at my door. He looked sheepish. "I owe you an apology." I shrugged. "You owe me coffee." "That'll do." We sat at my kitchen table while he explained how clients had started to hear about the investigation, not from gossip, but from the actual financial department of the police. Once the story reached them, they started connecting the dots. Suddenly, Claire's version didn't make sense anymore. "She said you ruined her life," Ethan said. "Turns out she was the one doing the ruining." I gave a small smile. That's her favorite game. With Ethan's help, I slowly regained partial control of the company. Not full yet. The board still wanted stability, but it was a start. I didn't even care about the title anymore. I just wanted to rebuild. Meanwhile, Morales kept me updated on the investigation. One day, she called to say they'd executed a search warrant at Claire and Mark's apartment. They'd found fake financial statements, old bank cards, and, this was the best part, my missing external hard drive, still plugged into her computer. When they analyzed it, they discovered she hadn't even tried to delete my files. She'd just renamed them. The stupidity almost made me laugh. A week later, Morales called again. "We've brought her in for questioning," she said. "She's denying everything, but we have enough to move forward." "How's Mark taking it?" I asked. Morales hesitated. "He's cooperative. Turns out he didn't know she was using his information too. He's not standing by her." That made me pause. Part of me expected him to defend her, to believe her lies like everyone else had. But I guess that envelope I'd given him weeks ago had done its job. Because in that envelope, among the first few pages, was something simple but devastating. A copy of a private message between Claire and one of her old friends. In it, she bragged about using Mark to get back at Ryan and joked about keeping him around until the ring's worth more than the man. I hadn't forged it. She'd sent it years ago, long before their engagement. I just found it and waited for the right moment to let it surface. Now, everything was unraveling. Not because I shouted, not because I fought, but because I stayed quiet long enough for her to hang herself with her own words. 2 weeks later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Morales' voice was steady. "Ryan, I thought you'd like to know, the DA approved the case. She's being charged with fraud, identity theft, and falsifying legal documents." I didn't cheer, didn't even smile. I just sat there in silence for a long time, the weight of everything hitting at once. 8 years of my life, burned down to ashes, and finally, someone else saw the truth. But my revenge didn't end there. The day the news broke publicly, it was everywhere. Local business forums, community pages, even LinkedIn. Graphic designer arrested for financial fraud and identity theft. Victims include ex-fiancé and current partner. Her picture, the same one she'd used for her engagement announcement, was now plastered under a headline she couldn't control. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Mark. "I didn't believe you. I should have. She drained my savings too. I'm sorry, man." I stared at it for a while before replying. "You're not the first person she fooled. You won't be the last." A few hours later, I opened my laptop and logged into the company portal. Ethan had reinstated my access, and a message from him sat waiting at the top of my inbox. "Welcome back, partner. We've got work to do." That was the first time I actually smiled in months. I started small, rebuilding client trust, focusing on the projects that mattered. Ironically, The publicity from the case made people curious. Some even reached out with messages like, "Saw your name in that article. Can't believe you went through all that. You handled it well." It's funny, the same internet that helped her destroy my reputation was now helping restore it. Meanwhile, Claire's case snowballed. When her parents found out, they were furious, not at her, but at me. They called once, screaming that I'd ruined her future. I hung up mid-sentence. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. A few weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that her family had cut her off financially. Mark had moved out. Her design license was under review. The house of cards she'd spent years building finally collapsed, and I didn't have to lift a finger. The night after the charges went public, I sat on the balcony of my apartment with a glass of whiskey, Milo sleeping by my feet. The city lights shimmered below, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't gloating. It was peace. I'd been through the fire and come out cleaner, sharper. In the months that followed, life began to take shape again. My company expanded into 2 new contracts. My parents, who'd finally learned the truth, apologized for doubting me. "We should have believed you," my mom said, tearfully. "We're proud of you, Ryan." Funny thing is, I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just nodded and said, "It's over." But in the quiet of that night, I opened my email one last time and found a new message from Detective Morales. FYI, Claire accepted a plea deal. 6 months probation, restitution, and community service. She admitted to falsifying the documents and misusing your identity. Case closed. Attached was the final police report. Cold, factual, and beautifully complete. I saved it. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes revenge isn't about shouting louder. It's about outlasting the storm. And as I closed the file, I realized something else. The best revenge wasn't what I'd done to her. It was how little I cared anymore. Still, before I turned off the light that night, I couldn't resist sending one final email, short, calm, and devastatingly simple. It was addressed to Claire's lawyer. "Please forward this message to your client. I forgive her. But next time she forges something, tell her to fix the R's." I hit send, leaned back, and smiled as the city hummed outside. Because I'd finally won, not by fighting dirty, but by staying silent long enough for the truth to speak for itself. The message I sent to Claire's lawyer felt like the final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't need one. For the first time in a year, my hands didn't shake when I closed my laptop. I went to bed that night and slept through until morning. No tossing, no replaying old conversations, no tightness in my chest. But life has a way of circling back, even after you think the story's done. About 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name printed neatly on the envelope. I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. Claire's. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in blue ink. "Ryan, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I never meant for things to go this far. I was angry, I was stupid, and I let people push me into things I didn't understand. I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my friends, my family. You probably think I deserve it, and maybe I do. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I'm sorry. You were good to me, better than I ever deserved. I hope someday you can forget what I did and remember who I used to be before I ruined it. Claire." I read it twice, maybe 3 times, and then folded it back neatly into the envelope. For a moment, I felt that old ache in my chest, the part of me that used to want closure, or maybe even forgiveness. But it wasn't pity I felt for her. It was detachment, the kind that comes when you finally stop carrying someone else's chaos. I didn't reply. I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it into a drawer, next to the police report and the court settlement papers. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. Over the next few months, life kept improving in small, quiet ways. My company fully recovered, clients returned, new ones came in. The narrative flipped entirely. Suddenly, I wasn't the man accused of fraud, but the man who exposed it. People admired that I'd stayed composed through it all. They called it resilience. I just called it survival. Ethan and I restructured the business, rebranded it, and launched a new branch. I started mentoring younger entrepreneurs, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. My name started circulating again, this time for the right reasons. Meanwhile, word about Claire's downfall spread through our old social circles like wildfire. Her design license had been suspended indefinitely pending review. Her firm cut ties with her after the charges became public. Even the friends who once parroted her lies stopped returning her calls. But it wasn't just professional. The social consequences hit her harder than any fine ever could. A mutual acquaintance, a photographer named Jenna, reached out one day. We hadn't spoken since before everything went south, but she messaged me out of the blue. "You probably don't care, but I saw Claire at a cafe downtown today. She looks different." She was alone. I didn't reply right away. After a few minutes, I wrote back, "I hope she's okay." And I meant it. Because that's the strange thing about revenge. When you finally get it, it doesn't feel like fire. It feels like water. You stop burning, stop suffocating, and realize you've been breathing smoke for months without knowing it. But the real closure came unexpectedly, through Mark. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when he showed up at my office. I almost didn't recognize him at first. He'd lost weight, looked older, like someone who'd aged years and months. When he stepped in, I could see the hesitation written all over his face. "Hey," he said softly. "Mark," I said, standing. "Didn't expect to see you here." He nodded awkwardly. "I won't take much of your time. I just needed to say something." I gestured for him to sit, but he stayed standing. "You were right," he said. "About everything. About her. About the lies." He rubbed the back of his neck, his voice breaking slightly. "After the police showed up, I found out she'd used my name too. I lost my job over it. Had to move back in with my brother for a while." I didn't say anything. He went on. "I spent months hating you because it was easier than admitting I'd been used. She told me you were the monster, that you'd ruined her. But you were the only one who saw her for what she was." He paused, then looked me straight in the eye. "I'm sorry, man. You didn't deserve any of that." I let out a slow breath and finally spoke. "You weren't the only one she fooled. Don't beat yourself up over it." He nodded, grateful but still weighed down. "You're a better man than me. I don't think I could have handled it the way you did." Before he left, he handed me a small white envelope. "Found this when I was cleaning out her things. Thought you should have it." After he left, I opened it. Inside was a faded photo. The two of us, me and Claire, from years ago. We were at a beach, laughing at something off camera. On the back, written in her handwriting, were 4 words: "He always believed in me." I stared at it for a long time before setting it down. Belief, I realized, was both my strength and my flaw. I believed in people too easily, and she'd used that like a weapon. But it's also what helped me rebuild when everything collapsed. The weeks rolled on, and life slowly shifted from survival to living. I started seeing someone new, Hannah, a writer who'd been working with my company on a branding project. She was calm, grounded, the opposite of chaos. When she laughed, it wasn't to impress anyone. It just sounded genuine. I didn't tell her everything about Claire right away, but when I finally did, she listened quietly and said, "You didn't lose yourself. She just made you forget who you were for a while." And somehow, that stuck with me more than anything else. Months later, I got a final update from Detective Morales. Claire had completed her community service, working at a local shelter, and was now relocating to another city. "She's keeping her head down," Morales said. "Seems like she's trying to start over." I thanked her for letting me know. She paused and added, "Most people we deal with deny everything until the end." But she admitted to everything in court. Said you didn't deserve what she did. For a long time after that call, I sat in silence, staring out the window at the skyline. I realized that the story I'd been living for the past 2 years, the heartbreak, the manipulation, the fight to clear my name, wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. Reclaiming who I was. Reclaiming my peace. One evening, about a year later, I was walking Milo through the park when I spotted someone sitting alone on a bench near the fountain. It took me a second to recognize her. Claire. She looked different. Hair shorter, a little grayer, shoulders hunched. There was no designer bag, no flash of confidence, no makeup hiding the exhaustion. Just a woman sitting quietly, feeding crumbs to pigeons. She didn't see me, and I didn't approach her. For a brief moment, I wondered if I should say something. Maybe tell her I hoped she was doing better. But I realized there was nothing left to say. Some things don't need closure, they just need distance. I turned and walked away, Milo tugging at his leash, the sun dipping low behind the trees. When I got home, I opened the drawer one last time, the one with the letter, the photo, the reports, and pulled them all out. I stood over the sink, struck a match, and watched the papers curl and blacken, one by one. The flame was small, almost delicate, as it consumed every trace of the past. When it was done, I rinsed the ashes down the drain and leaned against the counter. It was over. Completely, finally over. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way. No grand confrontation, no speech about justice. Just quiet, steady peace. The kind you earn when you've already lost everything once and learned how to rebuild it better. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, stepped out onto the balcony, and watched the city lights flicker below. Milo lay beside me, tail thumping softly. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself, older, sharper, but calm. No bitterness left. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because she had taken everything she could, my love, my money, my peace, and I'd still come out whole. That was the real revenge. I whispered it to the quiet night, just to hear it out loud. She broke me thinking I'd stay broken. Then I raised my glass, looked out at the city, and said softly, "But I rebuilt myself stronger than she ever imagined." And this time, there was no one left to take that away.